team-reliant gameplay, melee weapons, high difficulty, infinite regenerating armor. Alright, hopefully that's enough to hold you over before the gameplay section later in the video. That's it this time here, because all of those things are There are timestamps in the description, and you can see them right here. Please skip to whatever part interests you the most. However, I have ordered this video in a way where you can just watch it start to finish, and you'll have all the information you need for later parts of the video. We're going to go over things in this order: context, story and heist storylines, gameplay and map design, developer philosophy, and my thoughts on what I played and saw. Now, I don't think there's any possible way I could remember to cover everything in this video. It was really hard to take notes and absorb everything while we were at Starbreeze Studios. Big thanks to them for flying me out to Sweden, by the way, which is where I got to play the game early. What I'm saying is, please leave a comment if you have any questions about the game. I will answer anything that I know or can get public information on from the developers. I'll also be streaming as soon as this video goes live, so feel free to stop by over there and ask me so I can answer you live. That way you get a quicker response. Link down in the description. Also, if you enjoy the video, please subscribe and like it. I'll be providing a lot of Den of Wolves content going forward. Let's start off with some context. I got to play Den of Wolves, the newest game from Starbreeze, for about 5 hours while I was in Sweden. It was a pre-alpha build, and I believe it's the same build that you've been seeing in the gameplay reveal trailers. Or at least really close to it. We had access to one main mission and one prep heist, which I'll explain soon. Now, I only have so much footage to show you, so be ready for that to pop up whenever it's needed. Anytime I and other content creators were playing the game, we were partnered up as 2 content creators and 2 developers. Now, when I say that, it wasn't completely guided. We were allowed to explore as much as we wanted and test out anything that we wanted. The developers were simply there for quality control, which is good because we crashed occasionally. And just to be clear about bugs and crashes and stuff, that doesn't reflect on the final product of the game. This was a pre-alpha build, like I said. It was very, very early into development. It's bound to have some bugs and glitches and issues like that. So don't worry too much about that stuff whenever I mention it. We were paired up as content creators with 2 developers, as I mentioned a moment ago. This is where the developers explained how things were working as we were doing it. And we were allowed to ask questions about anything we wanted while we were playing. This included game design choices, how systems work, and what future plans might be for the game. Big asterisk next to might, because they couldn't really tell us what the future was going to hold at this point. I think if anyone were to tell me that there was going to be a feature in the game at this point and it wasn't Ulf Andersson, I wouldn't believe them right now. I'm very particular in my words there, as this was a very early pre-alpha build, so things are very much subject to change. We basically got a good look at the bones of the game, but we don't know what the final, polished, finished product is going to look like yet. I'd like to end this little context section by saying this. You're going to hear a lot of praise from me in this video, and that's because this was such an early pre-alpha build. I can't talk about the things that I would normally talk about on my channel, at least not accurately. Don't expect me to talk about things like balance. I can only really comment on general game design, and developer philosophy is a big one. Besides that, I'm going to tell you about the gameplay as I saw it and how I felt it, which is all I think I can really do right now. As soon as we see more about the game, I'll talk more about stuff, good or bad. I'm pretty sure that's all the needed context, so now we're going to move on to the story and how heist storylines work, because I believe that's very important to know before we get into the gameplay. Again, if you're interested in seeing the gameplay, skip to this time right here. I know many of my viewers that's probably the most important thing that you want to see for Den of Wolves. Now, without further ado, let's talk about the story in Den of Wolves. The year is 2097. Midway City is established on a small Pacific island and becomes a safe haven for big business. In this future, AI technology has allowed entire governments and stock markets to be taken over by hackers, meaning something had to change. Midway City was created as an unrestricted zone for capitalism, leading to very fast technological advances. One of these advances is known as the Dive. The Dive is a new firewall technology that stops people from being able to hack you by using human memories and the brain as a firewall. This is going to come into play later, but just know this. You basically hack into someone's brain or memory, complete a challenge, and then it unlocks something like a computer or a vault in the real world. This is going to come up again in the gameplay section, but for now, keep a pin in that one. Let's instead talk about how the heists work. Heists are on a storyline. The best comparison I can think of is for GTA 5 heists, but let me talk a little bit more on it before you decide if that's a good or a bad thing. I'm personally a bit neutral on it, and I need to see a little more information before I make a good decision on it. Anyway, you decide how you're going to approach a heist before you even set foot in the lobby for it. Each heist will have prep missions, which you'll have to do to prepare for that final heist. For example, you might have 8 prep missions before you do the bank heist. Now, you don't have to do all 8 of the missions, but doing each prep mission gives you a piece of equipment or a favor in that bank heist. This means if you're just going loud, you can say, ignore 3 of the prep missions because those are stealth-only approach missions. They give you equipment or favors that are only applicable to stealth. Some of the other prep missions might just give you some extra equipment as well, like another drill or something to give you a helpful advantage. Realistically, this means you don't have to focus on prep missions too much if you don't want to, which is unlike GTA. You can instead do the minimum for your playstyle, which is probably like 2 or 3 prep missions, and then you can play the big, heist or whatever at the end more often. This is the general gameplay loop around heists. Now, when we played, we didn't get to plan around a series of prep missions. That's because the game was still on a very early build, like I've said a million times at this point. But they explain this idea to us in pretty great detail. Basically, each heist is a storyline you follow, making critical decisions along the way to decide how you're approaching the final big score. Success or failure in prep missions is possible, so if you fail a prep mission for some mission critical equipment or an additional favor, that will affect the storyline that you can take. This is where the gun for hire system comes into play, because it's important to know that people can grief you, they can blow your story prep missions, and then suddenly you don't have a piece of mission critical equipment for that final heist. You should go watch my Ulf Andersson interview. I talked to him in detail about it, and he gave like a 5-minute answer about why the gun for hire system is actually going to work for this game. But the TLDR from that is that you can tell randoms they're not allowed to do anything, your friends can control mission critical stuff, only you can control mission critical stuff. It's going to most likely be on a sliding scale, which will help ensure you get to play the game your way, but also play with as many people as you want. Now that's the general design for heists and story, so now let's get to the thing you've all been waiting for. It's a subscription break. If you're enjoying the video, please take this opportunity to subscribe to my channel. I'm currently making the move to content creation part or full time, so it'd mean a lot if you would subscribe to me, like the video, leave a comment, and go check out my Twitch channel. If you're watching this video right around the time it comes out, I'm probably live on Twitch right now. I'm doing that so I can take questions immediately and give you answers immediately. So if you have questions, go over there and ask me. Anyway, you're probably wanting me to finally talk about the gameplay. Payday the Heist and GTFO had a baby and I can't stop thinking about it. Big disclaimer again, this was pre-alpha stuff that we played. We had infinite regenerating armor like Payday the Heist, and after that we had a health bar with 100 health. Gunplay was a better version of GTFO's with an added ability to actually slide properly. It was a very nice change from the Unreal Engine slop that we are knee-deep in right now. This game's on Unity, by the way. Enemies are a lot less dense, but they deal significant damage just like in Payday the Heist. You have to stick together or be overrun and die alone. Have I mentioned Payday the Heist? Get ready for a big word dump you're gonna have to listen to twice to absorb properly. I mean it when I say this game feels good for those of us wanting a challenge. But it's not something as hard as GTFO, which is really nice. I couldn't turn my brain off for too long, otherwise I would lose my resources and go down, and that would cost my team some time getting me up. Now weapons, I will say, felt good but not fantastic. They shoot straight and get the job done at their own pace depending on the type of weapon. We had a DMR, an SMG, an LMG, a rifle, and a shotgun that nobody really liked. Going along with that, like Payday the Heist, I think this game really shines in the placement of your character. Killing enemies only happens so fast with the weapons we were given, so I had to be conscious of where I was constantly. If I was out of position or out of cover for too long, I would go down and cause a lot of strain for my team. It felt fantastic because there was more to do than just point and shoot at enemies. I had to think about every little move from cover to cover, or whether or not I was standing in a good position depending on how many enemies were coming at us. We had to keep moving, we had to watch flanks for each other, and we had to prioritize our targets carefully. The whole team-based package. Because it's a little hard to just keep going like this about the gameplay, here's a list of all the interesting mechanics I saw when I was playing Den of Wolves. Now these were all at play during a pre-alpha, so don't get too hard set on any of them. Some of them might be subject to change. I'm only saying that to cover my butt. While I was playing, we saw crawling for a brief amount of time after you went down so you could get to cover. Infinite downs with no need to go to like a medic bag or something like that. But if everybody on the team went down, the heist was over. We had sprinting and sliding. There was a dedicated melee weapon in your third slot. Recharging armor, Payday 2 style, but it recharged slowly over time. You had a health bar that could be healed via medical pickups. They were very, very rare from enemies, but were also set in places like vaults. I just remembered that health also regenerated up to 35 out of 100, just like in GTFO. There were no skills, and I don't believe there's a skill system planned for the game, but I don't know for sure, so don't crucify me. Like I said earlier, we had a few different weapons to try, and those were in primary and secondary slots. It was more of a main and special system like GTFO than in like Payday, where it's like a rifle and a pistol. It was pretty diverse. We had, I think, like you could have like a rifle primary and an LMG secondary, so it was more like main and special. There were 3 gadgets that work as your deployable tool. You could pick them up throughout the heist whenever you wanted. They were trip mines, deployable shields, and 2 sentry guns. You choose one before the heist, and the best one is the deployable shield, which is the one they show off in the trailer a lot. There was a very strict ammo economy. Your weapons have standard mag sizes. Reloads aren't super fast, so you have to think about when you're doing them. And you really need to pick up ammo from slain enemies because there's no ammo bag deployable you can just bring in. Although you could get ammo bags in vaults. We had drilling using these cool drills. They follow you around and they're invisible until you command them to get onto the vault. It's a cool way to limit the number of drills that the whole team has, but not who can place them. There were 3 types of enemies. We saw regular, elite, and bulldozers. They weren't called bulldozers, but we just kept calling them that. They were basically just big juggernaut enemies with big armor and big health. We also saw skill-based matchmaking because my partner was RedArcherLive for the first demonstration. Interpret that how you will. That was a long list of stuff, and I'm pretty sure I forgot something. Please leave a comment asking about gameplay features. I asked basically a million questions to the developers while I was at 10 Chambers, so I should be able to answer just about anything you throw at me for the most part, and I'll be on it as soon as possible. If I don't have an answer for you, I'll see if I can get it from a developer and if they'll let me bring it out publicly. And again, check my stream, see if I'm live, and you can ask me right there. Next up, I want to put a brief section here in relation to enemies and gameplay. We began the heist fighting a gang trying to break into this big dome-shaped vault. We broke in, got what we wanted, and on our way out, a different faction showed up. They were some type of mercenaries and they ambushed us in that helicopter looking thing. We then, in the middle of the heist, switched from fighting that gang to now fighting the mercenaries. And I thought that was pretty cool. Imagine in Payday 2 you're fighting the cops and then suddenly halfway through a major event happens and you're now fighting cartel members instead. It was pretty unique and it felt kind of cool. Next up, I want to run through the map design a little bit. I'm not really going to mention the prep mission because a lot of it kind of felt like placeholder, but just know that we ran through a building, drilled a vault, and left with a piece of mission critical equipment for a major heist. There was plenty of cover and enemies flowed in from about 4 different locations in the main vault room. Now the big heist though is the one that you see in the gameplay reveal trailer. It was a giant bank building with vaults lining the walls. This collection of about 12 small vaults randomly, and yes, I mean randomly in the replayability sense, had 3 passcodes we needed to get into the big dome in the middle. Once we had them, our handler, who kind of just sounded like a nerdy guy in a chair,
get in the scan to complete the link up,
opens up the big dome in the middle for us. We then fought a boss enemy that came out of the dome, similar to Hector in Payday 2, and that was pretty much the whole map opened up at that point. Objectives continued in that area for about 7 minutes after that, and the heist was over in about 20 minutes. As far as map design goes, I think it did a pretty good job. It had lots of cover to move between, so I never felt too exposed, and it felt like locations were important and reused as a result. Overall, it felt like a more compact, well-designed arena instead of something more linear like Heat Street and Payday the Heist. Think of First World Bank, only on a slightly smaller scale. Overall, the map design felt very tight and calculated and tailored to the way the armor and health system works in the game. It also complemented the relatively tight ammo economy, which I think is on par with Payday the Heists even though we didn't have ammo bags. I found myself running out of ammo if I stood in one spot for too long or camped my primary or secondary weapon too much. And that was pretty refreshing because I think games these days are too afraid to take away your ammo. Anyway, I mentioned the dive earlier. Let's talk about that from a gameplay perspective. In the previous section, I mentioned that we had to break into the big dome-shaped vault in the middle of the bank. But I didn't say what was inside there. Inside that vault is a man in cryosleep that we referred to as Han Solo. He, or I guess his brain, was being used as the firewall defending the thing we were after. So our hacker man, not Bane, hacks into his brain and injects us into the dive. I'll have some footage playing right here. It's that kind of odd-looking parkour puzzle from the trailer that we all saw. The way dives work in this game is pretty interesting and has limitless possibilities. We inject into this guy's mind 3 different times, and we complete a puzzle or a challenge unique to that guy's mind. For this heist, it was a parkour puzzle through several floating buildings, which we kind of were just assuming were important to his past. Each of the 3 dives was more difficult than the last, and they each had to be completed in a certain amount of time or we had to redo that one. Now that sounds kind of simple and low stakes, but it really wasn't, because everything is still going on in the real world while all of this is happening. See, we get injected to this dive 3 separate times, as I mentioned earlier. But that means it's happening between firefights, essentially. It gives you this crazy feeling where one moment you're hiding behind cover, you're ready to pop out and shoot 3 enemies that are approaching you, but right before you make your move, you get injected into the dive.
diving in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Now there's no weapons, no gunshots, just this weird parkour puzzle, a single layer of music. Now let's say you finish that dive after 60 seconds. Great, we've moved the objective forward, we finished 1 out of 3 dives. But then you need to remember, what are you going back to? And then just like that, just as quickly as you were put into it, you're zapped right back to the real world. And you need to be ready for those 3 people that were approaching you before you jumped in. Basically, you play the game like normal, time freezes and you do the dive, then you're zapped back to reality, oh there goes gravity, where time resumes. It's a great way to break up gameplay, and if you're really heated, sometimes you won't even hear the handler doing that countdown, and you'll be jump scared into the dive. I talked quite a bit to the devs about this dive concept, and they're planning all kinds of cool stuff since the possibilities are limitless. One example they gave me was transporting you to an arena and giving you a melee weapon, and then you're tasked with fighting in a high adrenaline arena for a few minutes. And then, bam, all of a sudden you're back in the real world, and you're on a stealth mission, trying to maintain your composure after everything that you just went through. Oh, and since that's my first time mentioning stealth in the video, It's kind of barely a thing so far, but apparently they're working on it. We got to see the way it's implemented currently, which is through augmented reality. Basically, you cloak yourself in augmented reality and you're invisible to enemies until you get too close to them, at which point they'll pretty quickly see you because you'll be shimmering, and so you have to execute them or hide from them to maintain stealth. Sometimes you can be spotted and kind of go loud for a second. If you defeat them fast enough, you'll go back into stealth. Or sometimes different sections of the map can go loud independent of the next section also being stealth. Basically, blowing stealth doesn't mean you're blowing stealth in this game like Payday. I also want to point out the augmented reality is how the drills follow you around. As I mentioned earlier, they're invisible until you use them on a vault. You can actually see this animation happen in one of the trailers. So that's everything for gameplay. Leave a comment if you have any questions and I'll see if I can get it answered for you. Before I go into my final thoughts on everything, I want to talk about developer insights and philosophies. You need to go watch my Ulf Andersson video that went up alongside this video. Again, check the description for that link. Ulf Andersson is the mastermind behind this game's design and philosophies. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he's also the reason Payday the Heist was such a great game, and he did a lot of the work on early Payday 2. Once again though, I can't stress this enough, Den of Wolves is not another Payday game. It's more difficult and very similar to Payday the Heist, but I can assure you that Den of Wolves is its own game. Payday players beware, you're not going to play this one like Payday 2. Anyway, let's get into some developer philosophy behind Den of Wolves. 10 Chambers has a long history of being stubborn, I think is the word I want to use. Their previous game, GTFO, was intentionally made to piss you off at every turn. It relied heavily on teamwork, it had no prevention against griefers, it had no direction from some sort of handler like Bane in Payday, and at times it made the game feel even impossible no matter what. Even if you did everything right, the game would still feel impossible. Now they're stepping back from that a little bit on Den of Wolves. They're making it a little less difficult so they can be more inclusive to the Payday crowd, basically. However, they were still very clear that there's a very strict vision for Den of Wolves. It seems like prep missions are here to stay, even if you're worried about only wanting to play those finale heists, for example. Basically, these guys want to make a very difficult game, and if you don't like that, then it's not for you. Sorry. Now, for the next part, I have a little bit of a confession to make. Yes, I brought up Ammo Funnel, without directly naming it. Now, don't click off the video, please. Just wait a second. I wanted to hear how 10 Chambers would probably handle a situation like that, where some skills or weapons are overperforming, and, in their opinion, needed to be changed. They basically told me they would take the Helldivers 2 approach. Now, for anybody unaware, in Helldivers 2 there were some weapons that were overperforming, and it was resulting in people just wiping the floor with exceptionally strong enemies. And this resulted in higher difficulties being incredibly simple and relying on a single play style for the most part. Now, Arrowhead, the developers behind Helldivers 2, nerfed that selection of weapons. They then recovered the community's favor by buffing other weapons and stratagems to make up for that loss. This resulted in the game being more balanced, more playstyles being prominent and viable, and the developers getting to move on and work on more content that would be relevant in the future. This is basically the approach 10 Chambers and I discussed for the game, and I think that's pretty cool. They essentially told me they live under this philosophy of community interaction. The community, which is you and me, are valid in our thoughts and feelings, but we don't know how to balance the game. Our job as the community is to tell the developers if the game is good or bad. It's that simple. It's the task of the developers to mold and change the game until the community says the game is good. Now, if that means making changes that the community doesn't initially like to get a better overall result later, so be it. And it was this conversation, I think, that convinced me Den of Wolves has a lot of potential. They're willing to listen to the community about our thoughts and our concerns, but they're also willing to just rip the band-aid off if they feel like they need to change things to make the game better. I know I'm going to catch a little flack for once again making that Payday 3 comparison, but I really want to just see how things look for Den of Wolves when it comes out, as opposed to Payday 3. Just trust me on this one. These guys have a decent vision, and they have the guts to stick to their vision. But they're also going to do it while still listening to us, it seems, which I know is a concern for a lot of us. Hopefully that gives you an understanding of what the philosophy is behind 10 Chambers and how they want to run things. The last thing I want to go through here before I end the video is my thoughts on everything. I'm excited. I'm really excited, but we need to wait until we see more. I talked about so many good things I saw while testing this game and talking to the dev team, but it's only in pre-alpha. The developers talked a really big game for Den of Wolves, but they need to deliver on it. The game feels really good where it's at right now, and I think it's going in a great direction, but it's got a long way before launch. I gave a variety of feedback while we were there, and I told them about the parts that I liked and disliked. The cool part is they genuinely seem to take that feedback to heart. And I think the coolest part is I even saw one of them take some notes after I gave feedback, if that counts for anything. As well, I think 10 Chambers has a decently good track record. GTFO had a decent early access, it had a great launch, and it had an alright life after that. I really do think these guys are capable of putting out an amazing game that co-op heisters like myself can enjoy. Let them work, be excited, and keep an eye on the game for now. You can bet your butt cheeks I'm going to be covering any piece of news that comes out about this game now. Be excited for Den of Wolves, but don't overhype yourself. I think this one's worth keeping an eye on for sure, but that's all we can say for now. That's everything. God knows how long this video is going to be. I've been recording for like an hour, and I feel like I've been typing the script for hours. Den of Wolves felt pretty good to play, and there are a lot of good signs behind the development. The devs are passionate and have a strict, clear vision for the game, but they're also willing to listen to the community and improve the game that way. Do I think this game's going to be the next Payday? If I had to give an honest answer, no. I think Den of Wolves is going to be its own game, and I think it's going to be a darn good one if 10 Chambers can deliver on everything that I saw, and everything they told me about. I think everything that we love as Payday players was definitely there, so we're really just going to have to see what the future holds. If the game ever comes out at this rate,